Hi everybody, and welcome back to the session with Will Pye. Hi Will.
Hi Grace.
Welcome.
Good to be here.
And all of you, this is a session of the Awakening in the Heart retreat. And we'll do this session like we've done all the other sessions. To start with, I'll be talking to Will. And then at some point, there's just like the conversation kind of comes to a close, and then we'll open things up to questions from people, and also if you'd like to come on to the Hangout to ask Will a direct question or share something, you're very welcome to do that at that point. For the initial part of the session, for the conversation part, I'd ask you to not come on. And in the background, you will hear my cat. She's not happy because I'm not letting her out. So you may hear her meow a few times.
I have two cats in the room, so we may have a chorus of meowing at some point.
Wonderful. Yeah, so let me introduce Will to you. Will is a teacher and coach, as he describes himself these days. And he kind of travels all over the world. He's in the States, in the United States right now. He's going on to Australia, where he lives part of the time, but he'll only be there for like 5 days before he heads back to the UK. And he says he's looking forward to settling in there for 3 months. So, well, you're truly traveling spirit, free spirit.
It's great to land here with you now, Grace.
Yes, it's lovely to land with you, Will. So the topic for this session is Heart, the Center of Intelligence. And I have to admit, I had a bit of an exchange with Will about that title, which he proposed, because to me it sounded a bit too mental. But in the end, it actually fit in quite well with the other session. So I kind of bowed to the intelligence of Will's heart and mind to suggest that title. So, Will, why don't you talk to us about that? It's a very interesting way of looking at the heart, and one that I actually do find interesting, which is to look at it also physiologically in terms of what the heart actually does as a second brain. You'll tell us about that. And obviously, physiology doesn't mean anything other beyond what it actually means. So it'll be interesting to see how you extend that out to other levels of the heart's existence and nature. So go ahead, Will.
So when I'm speaking about the heart, I'm speaking of the area in the center of the chest. And obviously it corresponds to the physical heart. They're pretty close by. And it's an interesting thing because neurocardiology offers us an interesting perspective lens upon what's happening with the physical heart and the brain, and then with intelligence in general. And they're typically speaking of the physical heart, the organ. And yet when I speak of the heart, just to clarify, I'm really speaking of both the physical manifestation and the energetic space in the center of our chest. And I can feel that energetic center in my chest now. It's always there. It's always alive. There's always movement. There's always energy in the heart center. I've heard it said that the journey from the head down to the heart is the longest journey of 18 inches that you'll ever take. And it was funny hearing you mention the title being mental, in the context of this being focused on the heart, of course. And for me, in my own unfolding, a journey from the head down to the heart has certainly been integral to that, central to that. And a lot of Qigong was a big factor in the opening of the heart center, the awakening of the heart. And I actually still recall fondly the moment. It was a facilitated conversation I was having with a friend on a Zen session, on a Zen meditation retreat, and he allowed me to experience speaking from the heart and from the head, one soon after the other, such that I was able to see for the first time ever what the difference was, or to feel perhaps what the difference was. And so that's been a keen interest for myself, is how that process unfolds, what it's about, what it suggests. And of course it suggests that for me and for most people, I think especially men, we tend to be spending more time in thoughts, in the mental realm. I think it's the most socially acceptable addiction of all of them, is to be constantly thinking, to be obsessed, as it were, with thought. And this movement down into the felt sense, into knowing rather than analyzing, into that space where there's an instantaneous knowing rather than a process of analytical thought unfolding in time. This is a key element for me of what awakening is and how awakening is experienced. I've always enjoyed the lenses that science offers, because here we have a language that many people really only speak reason, or they only speak science, and there's a sort of fashionable logical fallacy that if something hasn't been proven by science, it doesn't exist. So I arm myself with as much hard data as it's possible to gather, such that I can communicate with hardcore materialists and reductionists and so on, and offer a lens into the feeling, into the knowing, through the reason, through the mind, through the thought structures and ideas. And
yes, and well, I just want to say, I mean, I was a bit flippant, but my response, what I felt was that you were talking more to the hardcore, thinkers in that title, and actually, it's a valid, valuable way in too, I mean, actually it kind of, it's helpful to all of us. It's actually fascinating to know that even at that physiological level, we can see that the heart is like a second brain and has intelligence. So anyway, I don't want to give away too much, but I just wanted to add that.
It seems to be especially useful for people who are thinking heavy, who spend more time or have a greater bias of their consciousness towards the mental body. I think if you're living largely in your heart, if the heart has awakened, if the heart is open, if our communications, our engagements, our everyday moment to moment is heart based, then you're kind of good, right? You're taken care of. You're all good. You don't need to be doing so much work around the heart. Or so it is those thinkers, the individuals who would not feel comfortable without reason being by their side or a rational argument being by their side. It is a routine, I think, for the reason itself to arrive at its own limitations through reasoning.
Yes.
And as you say, one of the sort of fairly significant fundamental findings of neurocardiology is, I mean, the very inquiry, the very field is based upon this reality that we have brain in our heart and indeed our gut as well, by any definition of what brain is. And the other stats that I find fascinating are that the electromagnetic field of the heart is, depending upon the measure, 5,000 or 60 times more powerful than the brain's. And this is a curious thing, because we tend to assume that the brain is the most powerful. You know, we tend to think the heart is just a physical pump. That's generally how it's categorized or conceptualized. We have this physical pump, and the brain is the center of intelligence. The brain is where we think things through and how we make sense of the world. And of course, there's some truth in this. And yet this data about the energetic power of the heart that we can subjectively experience now, we can be aware of now, we can feel into our heart center now, and science has got just enough capacity to be able to measure. This is an interesting bit of data, supporting many of the spiritual teachings, right, that point us to the heart as being the heart of the matter, at the heart of all things.
Yes. And actually, you know, I think what it also supports is the fact that teaching, you know, what many teachers say, words that actually make the difference. It's not what is said, it's what's transmitted. You know, it's usually put in terms of transmission. And transmission really is a kind of resonance. And the resonance, you know, comes from the heart. And, you know, even neuroscience is like, yes, the heart is powerful enough to create that, to be in that resonance, for others to kind of catch that somehow, you know, as it's there powerfully in a teacher. And so as it transmits itself, even in that way, you know, it's like need to have the scientific data to kind of prove that the heart has that power.
Yeah, it's nice to have the data alongside the experience and alongside the subjective insight.
Yeah.
And certainly the I don't really have any, speaking of my own experience, I don't really have any teachings as such. No, I do, but I don't have a sort of system of consciousness or a grading of consciousness, or it's really just responding to the group and the individual and the circumstances that are there. But so there's very little curriculum or syllabus or anything that is actually taught. And what is shared is what is being experienced. And words can only dance around that experience and point to it and evoke it and speak a little poetry about it and you know, point to it in some way. Yet the communication that occurs very often is clearly happening on a level that's beyond language, that's beyond the conceptual communication, it's beyond the activity of the intellect, either my mind that's putting words into a sentence or playing a role in the construction of sentences, or the mind that is hearing those words. And there's another layer of communication, and that's something that we feel. And so I'm interested in working with this with people to explore in our own experience, how true is it that the heart is the center of our intelligence? So if this has practical applications as we're engaging in life, whether it be in spiritual matters or apparently non-spiritual matters, to check in with the felt resonance, to check in with what is known rather than what is thought. And it doesn't take much inquiry in my experience to discover the limitations of the mind. You know, to really be face to face with the extraordinary limitations of the mind for navigating reality or understanding reality or communicating or getting from place to place. It's just a very, very limited tool, and we expect so much from it, more than it is capable of giving. We expect truth from it, and the mind has no idea. But there's this knowing in the heart that is quite distinct, that is quite different, that is that which we are searching for, that is that which we are looking for. And more of my path, and consequently what I explore with people, is the yielding to the heart. Yielding to the heart. It's like bowing to the heart, being devoted to the heart, looking to the heart first, allowing the heart to have its way. And,
so, well, when you say that, yielding to the heart, bowing to the heart, letting the heart have its way, what, or let's say, what do you mean by that?
In very simple terms, first and foremost, to feel it, to actually feel it. So it's common and thus considered normal, and thus other than dysfunctional, to not be feeling. You know, we learned that it was too painful to feel that anger or sadness, or we were told it was too painful for our parents, perhaps, for us to feel anger or sadness. And so there's very often a disconnect from the presence of the heart, from the reality of the heart. We're not aware of it. And we're aware of thoughts as a collapsing of consciousness into thoughts and perhaps subtle sensations. And this is to override that and to bring attention to the heart, to what it's saying, to this center over our chest, what's actually being felt here. And often people may not have the capacity to actually feel what is here in the heart. It takes practice, and they might need to use a hand on the chest or fingers on the heart center as they train awareness, train consciousness, as it were, to come down, to rest, to drop. I mean, this dropping into the heart is a phrase, but it's a literal recounting of the experience for me as well. It is a dropping of consciousness into the heart. So yielding to the heart is allowing attention, allowing consciousness to fall more and more deeply, more and more softly, such that we're residing in this felt sense.
Well, would you be open, would you be willing to actually share a guided meditation with people here?
Sure.
Right now?
Yeah, for sure.
Because, you know, the most direct way of knowing what you're talking about is simply, you know, leading them in that experience.
Absolutely. I think
In
that
that
sounds like a
moment.
lovely idea.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move into a comfortable position. Hopefully we're all sitting down watching the computer, so we're probably comfortable, but if not, allowing the back to be straight and finding ourselves a comfortable place. Bringing awareness into the body, bringing awareness to where our body touches the chair or where our feet touch the floor. Allowing awareness to reside in the body. And becoming aware of breathing happening, noticing simply that breathing is happening. No alteration or adjustment required, simply to notice breathing happening. You might notice that on the top of our lip, or the rise and fall of our chest, or whatever it is that we're experiencing that lets us know that breathing is happening. Simply being aware of this. And becoming aware of the in and the out breath. Noticing this in and out breath. Bring awareness now into the center of the heart, into the center of the chest. And if we locate that easily and simply, that's good. And we can also help the mind or help consciousness by placing a hand on our chest, or placing fingers or a finger around that place to touch our heart center and allow consciousness to fall into the center of our chest. And now bringing these two experiences together, simply noticing the center of our chest and noticing breathing happening. And bringing this in-breath and out-breath into the heart center. So we're now breathing through our heart center as if we had a mouth or a nose in the center of our chest. Breathing into the heart and breathing out through the heart. And noticing whatever we do notice in the heart center. What is felt there? Is the flow? Is the obstruction? Is the warmth? Tingling, perhaps? Pain, perhaps? Discomfort? An ache here or there? And simply continuing to breathe through the heart, being aware of whatever comes into awareness and allowing it to remain. Allowing whatever comes into awareness to remain. So we might feel discomfort in the heart, and we simply breathe into this. Not to change it, not to get rid of it. Simply breathing into whatever we feel, whatever we are aware of. And with the next in-breath, allow love to be breathed in. Now this might be to see the word love and breathe in the word love. It might be to see white light, golden light. If visualizations come easily, we might see white light, golden white light, entering into our heart, filling our body through entering our heart center with our in-breath. It might be that we breathe in the feeling of love, It might be that it is the feeling of love that we now breathe in. Whether the white light, the word love, the feeling of love, or all three, this is what we are absorbing, breathing in on the in-breath, breathing in love. And on the next out-breath, having noticed this love, having felt this love, having received this love, we may feel gratitude. And on the out-breath, we may say to ourselves, thank you. Breathing in love, breathing out the word, thank you. Perhaps still seeing a white light flowing out through us, or seeing the word, thank you, or feeling simply appreciation, feeling gratitude for this love that we are breathing into our being on each in-breath. Breathing in love and breathing out gratitude. Breathing in love. Breathing out gratitude. And as we bring the meditation to completion, simply resting a while, resting a moment in the heart. What do we notice now? What's happening in our heart center now? What do we feel there now? What sensations are present? And simply enjoy residing here for a minute. Nothing to do, no one to be. Just enjoying residing in the heart, as the heart. And bringing attention back into this here and now. If our eyes have been opened, we may want to slowly open our eyes if they have been closed, or we can just continue, because this is the wonderful thing about being on retreat in your own home. You have complete freedom to experience this retreat however serves you best. And of course our heart tends to be the place that we know what serves us best.
Thank you, Will. And thank you for bringing this up. There's always this so interesting when we are on retreat, when we listen to teachings. There's always, sometimes there's something that needs to be heard. And so that's why teachings are spoken. And there are other times when somehow that space of satsang, that space of being gathered to, in truth, in the heart, the one big heart. There's times when we simply need to rest in that space. And the words that are said, the teachings that are given, they're not where it's at. They're not relevant. You know, we could even say that maybe the teachings are there just so that the mind gets something to do, while being somehow expands to and needs being, simply is. So what you said, Will, was perfect in the sense that, you know, it can just be an invitation to be here with us, and there's no expectation and no compulsion whatsoever to actually listen to what is said. Simply enjoy being. It's just that being on the internet, you know, somehow something needs to be said.
Uh-huh. To reassure the mind that something is happening.
Exactly.
It tends to like to see some noise or some bangs or whistles, something to indicate that movement is happening.
Yeah. But you know, there's this wonderful thing, and you know, that's one of the reasons why I invited you to come back to this retreat, is that you publish these little YouTubes, you put these little YouTubes on the net. And there was one that somehow I found on Facebook that was about yielding.
Mm-hmm.
And it was perfect because, you know, the yielding, it's like whatever words you used were used to direct people into the heart where no words are needed, into beingness where no words are needed. But somehow the words have a function, you know, and really beautifully and really well in that little video. So, you know, somehow you have an ability to use words to allow you open to that which is beyond words.
It's beautiful to hear. I enjoy these little times of sitting down in front of the camera and talking to myself. It's quite a peculiar habit, but I enjoy it, and it's always lovely to hear that others are enjoying them too. And that yielding to the heart, yeah, I mean, this is my everyday practice, my every moment practice, to fall into the heart again and again, to dive into the heart again and again and again. And what that looks like right now is simply being present to what is being felt, simply being with the sensations of the heart, the stirrings, the aches, the always changing data that's coming from here. And to notice when I'm off in thought, notice when thoughts have become the center of attention, and remember that that's not necessary. It's perfectly fine, it's not wrong, and that once it's not necessary, there's actually a different way of being. Thinking is optional. They don't tend to tell us that at school, do they? That thinking is optional. So everyone's just thinking constantly, and that's just how it's kind of accepted, I think.
Yes, well, at school, for sure, you're told that thinking is actually necessary.
Mm-hmm.
It's not thought to be optional at all.
And the funny thing, we look at often the scientific endeavor is held up as evidence of the mastery of reason, the superiority of reason, and there's some truth in this. And yet science evolves and expands through the heart's knowing. It expands through Einstein imagining riding a beam of light and what his heart knows in that, and ready for his mathematician friends to come up with the equations to support it. It's true of Newton, true of Descartes, true of Eisenstein, true of Einstein, true of Schrödinger. All these guys had their moments of inspiration, their moments of knowing, their moments of intuition. And so in a world where we're getting things so wrong collectively, or we could say falling so far short of what is possible for the human being, I'm always interested in what are the basic programs, what are the fundamental conditionings that are at the root of our collective discomfort and issues and dysfunctions. And the identification as a separate self, of course, is easy to see as being integral. The man who has $500 million and wants another $500 million is in the grips of a psychosis that is considered a healthy, normal, functioning ego. But they think they are that thing that is enhanced by numbers or by status, and so this separation seems to be primary. But also for me, the head-based interaction with reality. It's like we're 6-liter engine and we're only utilizing 3 of them or 4 of them. It's to not be utilizing the heart's knowing. Imagine if Vladimir Putin and Obama had both at school gone through some training, some meditation training, some state training, some neurocardiological procedures, such that they could notice when they're getting into incongruency in their heart variation and drop back into resonance. This is significant difference in the quality of communications and the quality of decisions that get made.
Yes. It's it's interesting you mentioned that, because it's really, it's really quite the thought to imagine political leaders actually coming from the heart, rather than the head. And of course the whole, social and political system is set up to perpetuate the thinking mode of functioning.
Yeah, it's what we do to our children is so cruel. What we do to infinite and eternal being in the school system is blasphemous, and it's so wonderful to see it changing, and to see more and more meditation coming into schools, and child-directed learning coming into schools, and non-violent communication, and so on, all these wonderful tools and techniques. And I think one of the most powerful things is for a teacher to be operating from the heart, particularly in some of the more challenging schools around the US or the UK or Australia, places in lower socioeconomic scenarios where there are metal detectors and so on at the school entrance, and for good reason. For a teacher in that situation to be coming from the heart, to be residing in the heart, communicating from the heart, teaching from the heart, they're a powerful teacher. Whether they're teaching English or chemistry or whatever their subject, they're teaching powerfully.
Well, it's kind of hard to imagine that happening in schools as they exist right now. Actually, I just see there's a comment coming in from Candice. She says, hi, Will, I have also heard about a dropping into the belly. Can you speak to this? And would you say there's a heart in the belly? Sorry, I thought somehow that was linked to the school issue. In my mind, it was but it just felt good to bring that in.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, Candice, good to connect with you. The question I hear is, or the comment is around there being a heart in the gut, and I think there's certainly a brain in the gut. There's certainly a brain in the stomach, and if the heart essentially is brain, then these words quite quickly become rather interchangeable: brain, heart, gut, and it can be an interesting experiential inquiry to locate consciousness in mind, in thoughts, locate consciousness in heart, in the center of the chest, and locate consciousness in the gut. So this becomes the inquiry in our own experience. What's true? So the question, is there a heart in the gut, can be one that we can answer ourselves by having a look. What is the heart? Well, okay, so the heart is this resonance I feel at the core of my being, the center of my chest. Is there a heart? Is that located in the gut? For me, it's quite a different feeling. The further down I go, it's quite different to feel in the gut than it is to know in the heart. I'm not sure if that answers the question or speaks to the comment, but yeah, I'm sure Candice will comment again.
It does, and if Candice wants to get back to you on that, she, feel free to. I'm just to come back to the schools also. It's clear that what is taught in schools mostly is just what's in the head.
Yeah.
So bringing in the dropping into the heart and into the gut would be very revolutionary, But there do seem to be some movements to bring at least meditation into schools.
Yeah.
And to some extent, whatever is taught in terms of creativity, if it's good teaching, if it's about teaching children to be in the flow of their own creativity, that seems to go in the same direction.
Yeah, and there's also an increase in trials and very successful trialing of child-directed learning, where children are actually given the reins and encouraged to explore what they feel they want to explore. For me at school, I recall being disappointed that I was being asked to study things that I had no interest in, and not being able to study things that I had a great interest in. For example, philosophy and sociology weren't available, so that wasn't studied. But there were other things that were of no importance. So I think there are important shifts happening within education, and as ever, it's the data and the evidence. So this is where the science and the research becomes so useful. It's this that opens doors. You know, when you tell a school district governor or whatever that 10 minutes of meditation every morning reduces absenteeism by 10%, for example, or improves this or that by 10%. That's when, of course, there's an openness to trying the hippie nonsense or the woo-woo, and just discovering that it works.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Candice just says, I appreciate that you point to the experience. Thanks, well, that was helpful. And it has also been my experience that the quality is quite different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wonderful relationship to begin, you know, to actually start to develop, cultivate a relationship with the heart, to actually be in relationship, to be aware of what's there, and to note how that becomes more and more. The more we feel, the more we can feel. And the more our heart opens, often broken open by a lover or by events in the world. This is the ongoing unfolding, the ongoing expansion, the ongoing awakening of the heart. This heart at the core of our being or consciousness, for me, that is at the heart of consciousness or awareness itself, which is love. And so this for me is the purpose of that relationship with the heart, is to come into relationship with love, to know ourselves as love, to know ourselves as a flow of love, as a flowing love. And I haven't ever been able to think my way to that, but certainly it's been possible to feel that, to become aware of it.
Yeah. In that context, well, I was, in your guided meditation, I was kind of surprised that you had people visualize in. And, I just went with it because I was interested in, just experiencing what would happen if I focused on love coming in. But there was something inside of me that said, well, love is right here. Why do I need to bring it in?
Mm-hmm.
Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think this points to the delightful ever-presence of love, and its ever-presence here and now. It's always residing here and now, and the tendency, or the logical assumption, that that we certainly have as a common thought, a common view, that we need to get love from outside of ourselves. And typically we look to another human being, perhaps, as being where we'll find love, or chocolate or alcohol. I firmly am in alignment with the view that our every movement is either a expressing of love or a seeking for love. And we do that in all manner of unskillful ways, by shouting at people and hitting people and smoking and so on. And yeah, it's a useful bit of feedback with the meditation to question that breathing love in, and to give attention to noticing the love that is already here. I think the movement can be helpful to locate it. When it's being felt, moving through, in and out. I feel this can be helpful, and to locate love as breath. So the breath is always happening, of course, and there is an in and an out, and yet really there's a flow of breath. There's an ongoing flow of breath. So this points us to, this gives us the experience of the ever presence of love. And I'm always eager to give as many anchors or hooks that will make their way into people's everyday life, so that on Wednesday or Thursday or whatever after this retreat, people may find themselves at work or in relationship, and how wonderful it might be were there to be a moment where love could be located in breath, or where the option to drop into the heart is remembered. And that's the great joy and beauty of these sharings, right? Is to hope that they may be of use in some way and enhance the qualities of people's experiences in some way. So there might be another guided meditation I can create where we're making that explicit, where we're coming into contact with something that is already here. We're noticing that which is already present. I know in my experience, some of the greatest gifts that have been given me have been discovering that love is not available outside of me. Through failed attempts to get it from someone else, or to get it from something, food or whatever, or thinking of the future. An imagined future might be where I'll find love or connection. And to discover that it's not in any of those places. And in that loss, in that failure, the great success is discovering, as the search continues, as the looking continues, to discover it's right here, right now, within us.
Yes. Yeah. I'd say two things. Well, one is that, and there's some discussion in the YouTube thread about, meditation and guided meditation. I just think, it is useful in that when people aren't in that knowing and aren't seated in that knowing of themselves as love, a guided meditation can somehow evoke that quality. And of course it can be evoked by, seeing oneself receiving it. It can also be evoked by seeing oneself giving it. I did in the last meditation retreat that I did, in Montreal. It came to do like a healing circle, whereby everybody said what they needed to receive, and others just kind of, held them in that need, or sent them what they needed to send them. And so we made the round, and what was very interesting to me was that two people said about this that it led them deeper into themselves than it had done during that meditation retreat. And it wasn't actually the receiving of love, it was the giving of love that somehow evoked it most powerfully in them. And I was just struck by this because, it can be the searching for love and the wanting to receive that evokes it. and the receiving of it that evokes it. It can also be the giving of it that evokes it. It's such an interesting play, because love can be both, and when we discover that we are love, it's like the receiving and the giving is one. It's such a mystery, but it's like, we're totally nurtured by that discovery, and at the same time totally empowered. There's both.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite prayers is the prayer of St. Francis, and there's a line in there that it's in giving that we receive. And of course, this is a profound insight and an important correcting of the notion that we need to get, we need to receive, but rather there is a receiving that happens in the giving, and there's infinite levels of interpretation of nuance that St. Francis is pointing to there. And one of them is, for me, the collapse of the very distinction between giving and receiving that you pointed to yourself there, that in fact there is rather loving. We might look into our experience and discover that there is simply loving, and there's no me and there's no you. There is nor God's love flowing through me, but rather there is just this love happening, this love knowing itself, yes, expressing itself, connecting with itself, reaching out for itself. And what I tend to focus on is to remind people, particularly in sacred activist circles and in spiritual circles and in places where people are in service, places where people are doing a lot of work for other people. I often remind people the value and indeed the necessity of receiving, because often we are better at giving compliments, giving time, giving, and which is great. We can be happy with this, and yet, of course, for that giving to actually be received, for that giving to actually be giving, there needs to be reception. There needs to be a receiving. And so I think for women especially, for mothers especially, this is often where some light being shone can be helpful. It's like it's actually just as right or desirable or indeed selfless or altruistic to love myself, or to nurture myself, or to receive love, to receive compliments, to receive kindness. It's just as important as the giving. And ultimately, this collapsing of the duality itself, the collapsing of the distinction between giving and receiving, can be the fruit of such an inquiry.
And you're totally right. That's my experience too, that ultimately, it's the receiving that's always the most difficult. Even though a lot of people think that's what they want, but when love is actually there to be received, it's actually not at all obvious to open to it, and yet that's what's on offer. And how can it be known fully if it's not known in the receiving and the giving?
Yeah, I think there's a great truth in A Course in Miracles that points to our greatest fear being the receiving of God's love, the actual really opening to the enormity, the totality, the purity of this love. And I know that many of us will have had such an experience in human relationship where there's a love being thrown at us, showered upon us, but we may not have been able to trust that love or to thus really receive that love. And I like, and Mani, who I believe was on with you earlier, a friend of mine, beautiful teacher, she has this phrase, I think it's a book of hers, dying to love. And I think that's partly why there is such fear, is that in the dissolution, in the total surrender to love, in total surrender to love, there is absolutely death that occurs. There is death of that which would be separate. There is death of that which would be fearful. There is death of that which would imagine harm can come to me. You know, fairly fundamental patternings and structures of consciousness that we think we are and we think is normal. If we're really serious about opening up to this tsunami of love that is breaking at our door moment after moment, that's a fairly significant upgrade to the operating system, and a fair bit has to fall away to accommodate that new data. We don't tend to like death, right? We don't tend to like death, even when it's the butterfly moment, even when it's the death of the chrysalis. We don't tend to like it. We don't tend to welcome
it. It's a striking way of putting it. So, well, I just want to have a look at the YouTube thread to see what's happening there, because we don't have all that much time left. I'd like to give space to people also to ask questions or express what they have to say, to share. So just give me a moment, and I'll have a look at that. So let's see.
It's just a little background noise here, so whilst you're doing that, I'll just close the door here again. It's been open.
Can you hear me well? It's not hearing me.
I'm back.
Okay. So just feeding back to you, Thomas, that says, the true heart has no location. Maria Blair, that says, all one and timeless, placeless, but definitely not meaningless. Brain versus heart, Thomas says. The former has no chance. The latter is ever victorious. It's quite the conversation going on there. Maria says, being rather heart-led, sometimes totally unfathomably, and being a being with a brain, I love transmuting the data into beautiful words instead.
Yeah, I think that points to an integration of the head and the heart that I find I would agree with Thomas's pointing there around the heart being victorious, and at once I would shy away from making a war between the head and the heart, or making opposition. I think it's in the integration of the thinking body and the feeling body that we tend to operate at our most functional, in my experience.
Yeah, good point. So going on with the YouTube thread here. Victoria has a question. Victoria, I'll come to your question. Oh, actually, it's a good question. So I'll ask it. Well, she asks, how can I come to terms with my feminine energy from the heart? Does the masculine surrender to the feminine or the feminine to the masculine?
That's a lovely question. I have no idea, but I tend to associate surrender with the feminine, with the yielding, the feeling, the receiving. That would be my association. And I think there's something beautiful pointed to there in the integration of the masculine and the feminine. And perhaps we find that integration in that moment in which we are fully feeling, and we're fully present to that feeling. So the feeling is allowed to flow at its fullest, at its most painful, at its most heartbreaking, or at its most discomforting, and we stay with that. So I would, in my mind, see this as it is the feminine that is feeling, it is the feminine that is moving fluidly through the emotional body, through the subtle body, and it is the masculine that is being present, that is holding space, that is saying yes to what is being felt. So this would be, I'm always interested in the experience rather than too much theory. I really don't have a great deal of use for too much theory or concepts around these things. I like to talk about masculine and feminine a lot, and in a conversation the other day someone said to me that just really doesn't work for them, so that was actually quite interesting, that even that conceptualizing can be unhelpful for some people. But in that experience, in that moment where we open to the grief or the fear or the sadness or the hopelessness or the disconnection, the despair, and stay with it, feeling fully and staying present to it, that for me is what I would experience as something like an integration of the masculine and the feminine as they move through this nervous system.
Yes, you know, the if you see it as a Shiva and Shakti, there's the Shakti that's moving, you know, the emotional energy that's moving, and the Shiva energy that simply is unmoving, present, aware, conscious. So maybe it's just both at the same time. Maybe neither is yielding to neither, or both are yielding to the other.
I think it's always both, and that's whatever the topic, it's always
Yes.
both. That's the paradoxical nature of duality, of course.
Yeah. So let's see what else is there. I can't feedback everything. So Maria says, beautiful words will facilitate great internal peace and stillness, I find. Thank you, Will and Grace.
Thank you, Maria.
So Maria also says, learning to love myself has been and is being one of the most beautiful journeys I have made. The rest follows from that.
Yeah. And there's such a peace there, and for me, the yielding to the heart and the self-love are very much the same movement. To say yes to those painful parts of myself is quite akin to saying to loving those painful parts of myself. It's the responding to my inner children in a way that I'm able to now that was not possible when I was 2 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old. And so to yield to the heart, to say yes to what's being felt, for me this is to love oneself. To love oneself as God loves oneself. Whatever that is.
As self loves oneself, maybe.
Yeah, indeed. There's a beautiful paradox, is self-love as a path to deepen the realization of no self.
Yes.
Loving oneself such that there's this dissolution we spoke of, this dissolving of the me that is being loved and the me that is loving. And there is then, I think Rumi put it rather well, as Rumi often does, loved, love and loving as one, something along these lines.
Sorry, who speaks a lot of noise in your mic?
There's a Rumi poem.
Rumi.
There's a line, I think he speaks of love, loved, loving. Speaking of cats, I just had a moment here. The cat just jumped off the bed quite acrobatically. I think he was moved by Rumi's words quite more so than I would normally expect a cat to be moved by.
Well, he was obviously expressing love in his own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as I as I experience, it's not really an experience. It's like the direction, loving, being loved. Somehow it melts into just love, being, and flowing whichever way it flows. But the essence of it, just being love, just being what is.
Yeah, and I think it's within this view, it's easy to see that wherever we wield our attention, wherever we bring our looking, is to bring love. And so in this way, what we resist persists. In this way, what we allow to fall away can fall away. And wherever we're giving our energy, wherever we're giving our presence, we're bringing love. This is something that is of great value in our world, to be able to show up and actually really be there for someone, whether it be a cashier or your sister, or to actually really be present.
Yeah, totally. And I really feel the truth in that, in you. Somehow that's one of your gifts to the world, is for that to become very kind of palpable in your interactions with others.
Yeah, it's been an ambition for a long time to be a loving presence for anyone that enters into interaction with me, and it is very painful when something other than that unfolds. If I'm unable to be love for someone, if me gets in the way, or I find that very painful. And
it gets more and more painful, doesn't it?
Yeah, it seems to be part of the process, part of the intelligence, part of the yielding to the heart, of course. That pain is intelligence. It's like the pain of sticking a fork in our hand. There's an intelligence in that. Don't stick forks in your hand. It's not a good idea. That's not the way the hand works best.
Mm.
I've recently fallen in love and exploring intimate relations in a way that I haven't been able to for some time. And so I'm on a supercharged, turbocharged, yielding to the heart course right now that's really exquisite. And yeah, a great practice opportunity. My mind, or I should say our minds, it's been the same for her as well. We've noticed how our minds just have no idea. Like our mind thinks we're not compatible, but our hearts are just in complete devotional love with each other. It doesn't make sense to the mind, but to the heart, there's no need for anything to make sense.
Love has its very ironic twists and turns, doesn't it?
Sure does. It sure does. Yeah, I actually had a moment yesterday of considerable laughter. I was looking into my sweetheart's eyes, and there's a recognition that this woman that I have fallen in love with has 2 or 3 tendencies, patterns that are particularly unlovable for me. And so how perfect, right? Because now I get to actually practice love, to really allow that love to not be obstructed by a moment's thought or an idea that there is something in someone else that should not be, something of this nature. And I saw that and found it very delicious and very funny. I was like, oh, what a perfect setup! What a perfect opportunity to die some more, to love. And,
Yes, totally. Sounds wonderful. You are obviously ready for that one.
Yeah.
So just getting back to the YouTube thread. Tomas says, brain surrenders to heart. The lesser surrenders to greater. Victoria says, thank you, Grace. Well, beautiful. Gracias. Maria says, my cat likes Rumi too. And Tomas says, my fish likes this retreat.
That's great. What's it doing, Thomas? Is it like swimming in a way that suggests pleasure? Or... I'm trying to picture what a happy fish looks like. So let's see. If there are any more, does anybody want to come on to the Hangout? If you do, we'd have to do that now because we don't have much time left. Who is courageous enough to join us?
Yeah, somehow people are really reluctant today to come on to the Hangout. I'm not sure why.
Do we need to promise not to ask embarrassing questions? We'll be very welcoming and we won't embarrass anyone who joins the Hangout.
Yeah, I have no idea. So let's see. Tomas says the fish communicates energetically.
Of course it does. Of course.
Yes, of course it does. So, we're being rather silly here.
Which is great. There's enough seriousness in the world and in spirituality to last us all, I
Yes,
think.
yes, totally. Why not include the cat and the fish and everything else?
Absolutely.
So, well, we are coming to an end, and I just wonder whether there's anything that you feel called to say before we close, that you really, that really wants to be said, wants to be expressed.
Simply that the role of awakening, the role of the heart in awakening, to is nothing less than the connecting with, realizing we are at one with, realizing we are the creative force of the universe itself, and that we are quite beyond worthy or unworthy, lovable or unlovable. It really is to see, recognize, know our perfection, our total perfection, our total lovedness. No matter how silly we are, or how stupid we are, or whatever mistakes we might make, no matter how much meditation we miss or reactivity we allow out into the world, we're loved. And this love can be found. This love can be found or realized right here, in the center of our being, in our being itself. And this is what Oscar Wilde was pointing to, and to fall in love with oneself and start a lifelong love affair, to really fall in love with our own being, to fall in love with our own heart, to dive into the love that we are already immersed in. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
I'm kind of tempted to ask a last question, but it's a terribly serious question. What do you say, Will?
I think a serious question is good. Can I mention my satsang this evening as well? Because there might be people here that are in Berkeley. There's an open circle satsang happening this evening. It's my last one in the US for a while. It's on the Open Circle website or on my website, willpye.com. If anyone wants to continue on the retreat with evening satsang, then that's a possibility for them. I think a serious question sounds like a great idea. Well, I can't guarantee a serious answer, but
okay, that's good. So here's my serious question. That realization of the love that we are. Times meets pretty substantial, seemingly substantial obstacles. Like one thing that that I saw some time ago, and I really appreciate your openness and honesty about how things are lived by you and what's kind of coming through and moving through. So you shared about old kind of, suicidal thoughts kind of occurring again.
Sure.
So, you're not the only one. People do face serious challenges. So, what can you say to them what can be helpful when
So,
those things come up?
yeah.
And
So
how did you face that?
it's a beautiful question, and I might have some seriousness in my response and some playfulness. There's a clarification that I would offer that there is, in truth, there is no obstruction to love's presence. In truth, there is no obstruction to love's presence. Though, of course, we experience it as being that way. We experience it as if there is an obstruction to love's presence. And to the clarification that I would offer is to consider that there are only ever invitations to love's presence. There are only ever openings into love. And these openings may present as despair, they may present as anxiety, they may present as depression, they may present as our life falling apart, financial challenge, whatever it might be. And what I would want people to know more than anything, perhaps, particularly if people are in suffering, if they're in the intensity of emotional pain or self-loathing, or the many painful ways that mind can inflict itself upon us, as it were. I would offer that it's been my experience a couple of times in the sort of stereotypical dark night of the soul experiences. I've had what I would legitimately call two dark nights of the soul, so two periods of time during which in each one there was a total hopelessness, and the emptiness and meaninglessness of life, which can be a liberating insight, became a crushing insight. And what I found on both occasions, and it moves me deeply simply to recall this now as I share it, what I've discovered on both occasions is that at the core of that darkness, or we could say on the other side of that hell, or there is light at the end of the tunnel, quite literally. And when we're in the tunnel, when we're in depression or grief, it can be very easy to lose faith, to lose hope. And there can be a beauty in that as that is dissolved, as that is polished away. And yet what I would offer people is that there is a function and a purpose to those challenging times, and that the yielding to the heart, the loving the depression, the loving the despair, the loving all these aspects of our experience is the way of healing, is the way of realizing wholeness. That is to say, yes, this is allowed in me. This can be held. I can allow fearful self to be present. I can allow fury to be present. I can allow hopelessness to be present. And I can know myself as that which is present to all these things. I can know myself as that which is present to all these things. And that is, for me, the function and intelligence of what we call mental health problems or mental illness. For me, it's all awakening happening, it's all intelligence happening, it's all healing unfolding, and yet we tend to pathologize and medicate away the experience because it hurts.
Yes. And also, to be honest with you, not everybody will have that ability to, that unmovingness, staying present, And when that isn't there, it can really just be too much.
Yeah, and in my experience, in the too muchness, In the too muchness, there is wisdom and there is love. In the too muchness that brings me to my knees, with snot and tears everywhere, and beating the floor, beating myself, and beating God, and beating up everything. In that place of despondency and despair, that too muchness, I have found to be God's love. I have found to be the love of the universe itself. Not through anything other than repeated failure and grace, appropriately. The good fortune of being brought to my knees again and again. I heard a sacred activist called Adam Bucko, who wrote a wonderful book called Occupy Spirituality with Matthew Fox. He was speaking of part of the path, including being chopped to pieces, just being chopped to pieces when life gets too much, when there's too much there. And so I balance a total empathy for that experience and an acknowledgement of its truth with a recognition that there is an unbreakable core to every individual having any experience, regardless of whether they have realized that core yet or not. Yeah, so that's perhaps to consider. If there's someone listening here now, consider that in that pain, in that darkness, there is great light, there is great love.
Wonderful. And you know, I did overlook a question that goes in a similar direction that I will just ask you now. From Candice, can you speak to the challenge of this for people who have experienced a lot of trauma in the body? I think it's going back to the question of dropping into the body, but you know, trauma being another, trauma in the body being another challenge that can come up and, you know, be so total that it's difficult to stay present.
Yeah, and what I would be clear on is that everyone has experienced trauma because everyone has been born, and being born, we can see it's a terribly traumatic experience. And those traumatic residues are, I think, found in all of us to some extent or other. And of course, all the more so if someone has experienced a great deal of physical abuse or emotional or mental abuse or sexual abuse as a child, if it's been, or particularly traumatic events. What I have experience with is just the usual trauma of being human and the pain stored in the body and the yielding to the heart, the presencing that again and again and again and again. There is no easy way through. I've tried the easy ways out, and what I have found is that what's required is that those residual energetic structures that are held in the body, or those pains or discomforts that are held in the body, require loving presence again and again and again and again and again. And it's not glamorous, it's not a quick fix, but rather that's been my experience. And I'm resolved, if I need to spend the rest of my life feeling the pain in my heart, then so be it. I stopped wanting it to be other than it is. And in that presencing, in that showing up to the traumatic residues, there is healing, there is integrating of those emotional charges.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you, Will. You know, it's important for people to hear that over and over and over, because when they're struggling, as they're struggling, it helps to hear that this is what is required over and over and over.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And thank you also for being with us on this retreat. Thank you for coming in.
My great pleasure. Thank you for having me, Grace. I appreciate you putting this on for us all.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure and everybody's, I'm sure. So just wrapping up the session, and there's a last session in about 20 minutes time at past. It's just a short and sweet session, bringing things to a close, coming together, sharing your experience if you so wish on YouTube or by coming onto the Hangout, and then that'll be it. So thanks again, Will, and thank you to you for being there, and I'll see you again shortly. Bye.